Welcome back, everybody. Continuing my ADP of the month series, we've got some wide receivers today. I'm not doing any that I believe are too high because I pretty much believe any receiver being drafted in the top 10 is too high. So we have three guys that I think are going off the board way too low. We're going to kick it off with Amari Cooper. If you want more in-depth reasoning for this, go watch my video from yesterday, the player profile. I'm really proud of it. I think I did some really solid work. Do that first, then come back here. But if you want the briefer version, here you go. Amari Cooper is currently coming off the board at wide receiver 17, 46th overall pick, being drafted as a mid to low wide receiver 2 in around the 4th to 5th round. Last year was pretty rough, honestly, after those first 4 weeks with Dak. He finishes the wide receiver 16.5 PPR, 21st wide receiver in points per game. Considering he was drafted as the wide receiver 13, 32nd overall, that's a disappointment. But with this ADP, you're currently drafting him below his floor. In his year and a half with the Cowboys prior to 2020, he was wide receiver 9 last year and wide receiver 2 from weeks 9 to 16 when he was traded to the Dallas Cowboys. He stepped on that field with Dallas, and the moment he did, he dominated, he took over, was the second best receiver for fantasy football purposes in half PPR. Dallas's offense is high octane, high production, so there's plenty of points to go around for both fantasy and real life. Not to mention, in full PPR, like I mentioned, although the year as a whole last year was pretty rough, those first 4 weeks were something magical. Amari Cooper was on pace to have the third best scoring season for a wide receiver in the past 5 years. Now, I know the pace was ridiculous. I've said it multiple times. Dak was on pace for like 6,800 passing yards, 48 total touchdowns, 36 through the air, 12 through the ground, and that probably wasn't going to be maintained. It would have, even if he cools down to 5,000 yards through the air, that's still a really good season for Amari Cooper. And that's what you're getting from him, that week in, week out potential. He was also incredibly consistent, which kind of put to bed that narrative that he was a 1 week 30 point, 1 week 2 point, kind of how Mike Evans was in 2019. He had 16, 18, 16, and then 33, so giving you a nice wide receiver 1 floor with that boom upside to be the wide receiver 1 in any given week. Personally, for me, there's no reason that he should be below Robert Woods, who's fine, but I don't think he'll ever be anything more than fine. Chris Godwin, who had a fine year and is a great receiver, came off a wide receiver 2 performance in 2019, but I don't think there's any reason he should be above Amari Cooper. Deontay Johnson, sure, he'll catch a bunch of short passes from Ben Roethlisberger, but I don't know, I just don't like him more than Amari Cooper this year, and there's no way in hell he should be 2 whole rounds behind DK Metcalf. Following up Amari Cooper, maybe I should have let off with this guy. One of the bigger names in the wide receiver game, Slant Boy, is here, Michael Thomas. Last year, Michael Thomas came off the board as the wide receiver 1 at the 6th overall pick, following up his historic 2019 season. Everyone wanted on the bus, and the bus's wheels fell off, caught fire, and drove into an ocean. He played all of 7 games last year and was hampered by multiple injuries, the high ankle sprain. I believe there was some hamstring issue. He also needed surgery this offseason. He put off getting because he wanted to have Drew Brees lose in the playoffs again. Admirable, I admit it, but not the best for the fantasy owners, considering everyone who drafted him or traded for him got absolutely plowed, especially if you drafted him. You're basically throwing away your first-round pick, which a lot of people did last year, but it still hurts nonetheless. Because he did burn everybody in tandem with the emergence of other guys like Stephon Diggs, like Justin Jefferson, like DK Metcalf even, he slipped to the wide receiver 9 overall in ADP, 31st overall pick. So literally 2 to 3 rounds later than last year, beginning of the 4th round, end of the 3rd, depending on league size. You always know that's the case, but I think this is a ridiculous case of recency bias and just being bitter at a guy who burned everybody last year. He really wasn't that bad with Taysom Hill. In his 3 full weeks with him, keep in mind he was still probably banged up at this point, he averaged 10 targets for 9 receptions and 98 yards, which is pretty solid and doesn't sound that spectacular on a week-by-week basis, but when you extrapolate that over a full year, I know that's never the best way to get stats, but it's just a glimpse of what a guy could do with a quarterback. He had 160 targets, or would have had 160 targets, 144 receptions for 1,568 yards. That's incredible. That stacks up really well to his 2019 campaign, honestly. If you extrapolate that and you consider the fact that he scored 0 points in those 3 weeks, no touchdowns at all, he's still the wide receiver 8 on the year. If he scores 1 touchdown, he jumps up to wide receiver 5. So sure, while Taysom Hill is a god-awful quarterback who is more of a gadget tight end than quarterback at all, he still produced with them. Sure, it was at the cost of Alvin Kamara, but we're not talking about Alvin Kamara right now. We're talking about Michael Thomas. and he was producing like crazy with Taysom Hill in the lineup, while banged up with some pretty major injuries. So his ADP right now is below that full season pace with a god-awful quarterback. Since his rookie year, his finishes have been wide receiver 7, wide receiver 6, wide receiver 6 again, wide receiver 1, and then wide receiver 98. That's the hitch, but it really shouldn't be that big of a hitch. It was terrible injury luck, bad situation with the quarterbacks. He probably forced his way back earlier than he should have because he wanted to help Breeze. You're getting a ridiculous discount on a consistently top-level producer. And I haven't even mentioned the fact that Jameis Winston is likely the quarterback next year. Jameis slings the fuck out of that football every time he steps on the field. Good, bad, ugly, entertaining as hell, throughout all the way. He supports high-end fantasy receivers. In 2019, he supported Chris Godwin, the wide receiver 2. Godwin only played in 14 games. He also supported the wide receiver 12 and Mike Evans, who only played in 13. He supported 2 top 12 fantasy wide receivers pretty much by himself, and they didn't even play the full season. That's insane. He is an immense asset for fantasy. Even if in real life he's kind of rough, I honestly think some of those issues can be corrected. Maybe not with the LASIK, I don't know how much I buy into that. But sitting a year under Sean Payton with Drew Brees can only help him. He's got a prove-it contract. He's going to be desperate to come out and earn a contract, kind of fix his reputation, go back against that terrible gunslinger who would be really entertaining but really wouldn't do much to help your team win. He's on a prove-it deal, and he is a very, very solid fantasy asset. Don't hold a grudge against Michael Thomas if you were burned against him. He is a ridiculously consistent producer. Wide receiver 9 is an insane discount. I honestly looked at it at first and was like, yeah, this is fine. The more I looked into it, Michael Thomas's past production is insane. This is an elite value. I am not taking I'm not taking a receiver in the first round anyway. But there's no way in hell I'm taking Devontae Adams or Tyreek Hill in the first round when I can get an elite running back and possibly grab Michael Thomas in third or fourth. There's no justification for doing that. He provides just as much upside, if not more, because of the fact that he doesn't need to score a ton to do it. The touchdowns are just a bonus. He catches like 10 for 89, 11 for 120 every week. It's what he does. Regardless of who's under center next year, whether it's Taysom Hill, whether it's Jameis Winston, he's going to be an absolute value. And to be quite honest, if it is Winston or even Hill, I wouldn't be shocked if he's the wide receiver 1 next year. And getting that guy in the beginning of the 4th round is just ridiculous. Closing up the video with a more low-key guy, we started with Amari Cooper, mid to high profile. Michael Thomas, one of the greats right now. We have Cortland Sutton here. He unfortunately missed pretty much all of last year due to a torn ACL, and his ADP right now is sitting around wide receiver 33 or the 86th pick overall. So you're looking at a mid to late 9th round, maybe 8th round pick, depending on league size. I love to say it. In that 1 week, he had 3 for 66 against the Steelers. Respectable. Very tough defense, especially to start the year. That's a pretty decent game, especially considering Drew Lock was his quarterback, and Drew Lock kind of stinks. But when you go back to 2019, he was the wide receiver 19 overall with 72 for 72 for 1,112 yards, 6 touchdowns, a solid enough stat line, and he did it with Joe Flacco for a majority of the year. And Joe Flacco sucks. Joe Flacco is not good. He is currently Jalen Hurts' backup. Knowing the Eagles, I wouldn't be shocked if Flacco starts a game for some reason, but long story short, Joe Flacco sucks. He also had Drew Lock, who he might have again. I think it's almost a guarantee Lock is on the roster, but I don't think it's as much of a guarantee that Lock is the starting quarterback next year. The way the draft is shaped up so far, you have the Jags taking T-Law at 1. I think Zach Wilson to the Jets at 2 is all but confirmed. And the Niners at 3, they're taking a quarterback, whether it's Fields or Lance. Doesn't matter. I'm not sure which one just yet. I know a lot of people are going back and forth between those two. And that leaves number 4 as the prime trade-up spot for a team that wants one of those last 4 guys. I don't think it'll be Mac Jones. I could probably wait and get him, maybe swap with Carolina. But now that they've signed Kyle Fuller, patch up the secondary, you have Bryce Callahan, Justin Simmons is back. There's no pressing need outside of quarterback to take this team to the next level. So I can see them moving up from 9 to 4 to grab one of those last elite guys. We don't know how they'll turn out yet. Or they can make a move for Watson, depending on how that situation ultimately plays itself out. Moving away from the quarterback, because this isn't supposed to be a draft video, I just think it's fun to talk about it, because damn, it's exciting already. People are going to say there wasn't a lot of competition, and while that's kind of true, he basically forced Emmanuel Sanders into irrelevancy. and was the by and away alpha on that team. You see, this year he'll have Judy there as the 2, who I think will probably do a bit better as the 2. You'll have Fant, who's still emerging. I'd say Melvin Gordon, but they refuse to pass him the football anyway, so it doesn't even matter. But when you go back to 2019 and look at all those individual stats, he absolutely dominated both on his team as the guy and just in general. He was 10th in snap share in the entire league, 8th in target share, 6th in dominator rating, which is your total percentage of your team's yards and touchdowns, with 35.1%. He was 4th in the league, or has been 4th in the league in yards per reception since 2018 with 16.1, 8th in the league in separation over expected. Dude can kill you deep, dude gets separation, and he's a touchdown threat every time he runs a route, honestly. I don't think he's a top 5 guy the same way I think Cooper and Michael Thomas are, but in the 9th round, I think he gives a ton of upside as a high wide receiver too. With that weekly wide receiver 1 upside, especially if he has a quarterback that can get into that ball deep and connect with him when he separates so well. I will admit that there is some hesitancy behind this, considering he is coming off a torn ACL, and while physically he could be 100%, mentally maybe not so much, but then again, that's why he's a 9th round pick and not a 5th. In the 9th round, you're probably getting, your wide receiver 4, wide receiver 3. Having him as your wide receiver 4 is ridiculous. That's a great pick. That's a gold mine. And he provides much higher upside at this spot than guys like Juju, DJ Chark, and Odell Beckham, who are all coming off the board in front of him, as per RotoWire's ADP. So to recap it one time for the one time, I think that Amari Cooper, Michael Thomas, and Cortland Sutton are all too low this year at wide receiver ADP as of this very moment. Obviously, things can change, but hey, that's why I do monthly updates, because you got to keep yourself on your toes. That's going to be it for today. I hope you enjoyed. If you did, leave a like, comment, and subscribe. Really appreciate it. Helps the channel out. If you didn't like it, leave a dislike, leave a comment why. I'm always looking to improve, get feedback, get better. And that's going to be it for today, guys. See ya.